welcome to a Sacred Space podcast. I'm Katie, your host, and I am so excited to share with you how to create sacred space in order to heal and empower yourself. I want you to know that it is possible to live your dream life, to create amazing relationships, to experience joy daily, to be fully connected to yourself and passionate about life. No matter where you're at right now, it is possible to heal your trauma, your anxiety, and live a life beyond your wildest dreams. In this podcast, I will share with you the tools and resources I've used in order to create my dream life. And if it's possible for me, I know it is for you too. So let's get started. Hey beauties! So today I am coming on here to talk about healing addiction. This is one of my most asked for subjects. Last year I did a talk with Dr. Jenna Zellers on it. And this year in March, I'm doing a talk with Rachel Wish on it. So I wanted to just hop onto my podcast and talk a little bit about healing addiction, recognizing addiction, and what the root cause of addiction is. So, and I'll give you like a little background on why I know these things for myself. I actually suffered from addiction really my whole life. I think it's just kind of something that is in like my personality. But I also think that that most of us suffer from addiction at some point in our lives. For me, it started when I was a teenager. Really young, like 16 years old, I became addicted to meth. And it took me 3 years. I used it for 3 years, and it took me, a really long time, like a long time of trying to get off of it. And that was not the end of the road for addiction for me. I did eventually quit meth, and I was able to get clean from it and stay clean from it, but I still ended up using other drugs. I started recognizing that just quitting meth never ended addiction for me, that I had addictions in many other areas of my life. So it was like a lifetime kind of deal that I had to heal, that I kind of simultaneously healed my depression and my addictive behavior at the same time. So, and it's not to say that I don't still struggle with a tendency toward addiction, because like the problem is you could really be addicted to anything. Like now we're recognizing how people are addicted to their phones and to social media. And, there's so many things out there that you can easily become addicted to. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with drugs or alcohol or whatever. I think those are like the taboo addictions, but you can literally be addicted to anything. So, I've struggled with that, like I said, in many areas of my life, including work. And I've never been a huge fan of social media, so it doesn't get me as much, but I seriously swear I'm on my phone way too much. I'm always doing something on my phone. So I try to really be aware of it. But anyways, so this is a subject that is near and dear to my heart. It's something that I have struggled with my whole life. It's something that I've had to work really hard to be aware around. And like I said, it goes hand in hand with my depression. I think the main reason that I started using drugs so young in my life was because of the fact that I suffered from depression and anxiety really bad. And that started really young for me. I started having really bad anxiety and almost anxiety-like attacks when I was, I think like in middle school. Maybe it was like 5th grade. But I had a really hard time with that. And I ended up finding that when I took things like drugs or drank, that I didn't suffer from the depression and anxiety anymore. It lifted it. Of course, like when I sobered up, the anxiety and depression were 10 times worse than they were before I used. So that was a problem, and it kind of set me in this loop. And that's why I ended up, with an addiction problem. So, but the root cause of the addiction was not my depression and anxiety. The root cause of all addiction, in my opinion, or I should say from my experience and from the experience of people that I've known and that I've worked with, the root cause is a lack of connection. In our lives, like, we are social beings, like, as humans, that it's like, it's a given. We have to feel connected. We have to feel heard, seen, and understood. And that is the basis, like the foundation of connection. When we know that other people see us, hear us, and understand us, we feel connected. And this is like basic psychology. And when we grow up not feeling seen, heard, or understood, when we experience long bouts of feeling alone or isolated, this leaves us feeling disconnected. And disconnection leads to mental illnesses such as depression, anxiety, these sort of patterns, emotional patterns that end up in our body due to the fact that we feel completely disconnected from people and from life. And so that's what actually causes the emotions of depression and anxiety. And then that's usually why we end up seeking out things that make us feel connected. And that's what addiction is. It's actually the seeking out of something to feel connected. When people use drugs or alcohol, that's usually like in a social setting, or even if it's not in a social setting. For me, it always was, but even if it's not in a social setting, those drugs actually relieve the depression and anxiety so that you feel more connected to yourself. And it was not my experience that alcohol actually did that for me, but I know that for a lot of people it does. It sort of numbs you out and it relieves the feeling. So you get this sense of relief. And the sense of relief can actually lead to some false sense of connection. Okay, and that can go for any addiction. Work addictions, same thing. When you experience yourself always wanting to work all the time, you are gaining some sort of connection to yourself or to someone else through that work. And that's why you want to experience it all the time, because you're not experiencing it in other areas of your life. So wherever an addiction lies, there is connection trying to be made. And this is just, it's the basis of all addiction. And there is science to back that up, interestingly enough. I actually wrote a blog post on my blog about this. I think it was early last year or the year before. It might have been 2017. But there is a study, excuse me. There is a study that was done on addiction. And I am going to totally paraphrase this and maybe butcher it, but you can Google it and look it up. And it's also on my blog. If you just search addiction on my blog, you'll find it. Anyways, okay, clearing my throat. So there was a study done that this like scientist guy did, where they built this like city for these like rats, okay? And in one part of the city, they put a bunch of rats and they gave them normal water. And in another part of the city, they put a bunch of rats and they gave them, and like they couldn't connect, like the two weren't connected, okay? And then they gave them water with cocaine in it, okay? And oh wait, maybe... No, okay, I told you I was going to butcher this. I did. Okay, so what it was is in one part of the city, there was a bunch of rats together, like as a family of rats, okay? And they had cocaine in their water, and they had normal water. And, but they were like a family of rats, okay? Then in the other part, there was an isolated rat. It was just by himself, and he had the normal water and the cocaine water, okay? And so they watched what they did or whatever. And there was a lot that went into this study besides what I'm just telling you. But the main thing that ended up happening was that the rats that were like, rats are actually really social. So the rats that were together as a family could have cared less about the cocaine water, and they just drank the regular water. Like they tried the cocaine water, but they weren't like super into it. The rat that was by itself like got super addicted to the cocaine water, and that's all that it would drink. And so so I think they went further with this study and they did like a whole bunch of stuff around it. And like I said, you could read that. But it was really interesting to me because it really confirmed like everything that I've already felt about that, and how that the basis of addiction is just simply feeling completely disconnected. Like you're not loved, you're not worthy, and you are not seen, heard, and understood in your life. So that all being said, and that being like the root cause of what addiction is, as far as like healing the addiction, and this is different for everybody. I think like with addiction, you have to be really careful, like what you do, and make sure that it's like the right thing for you. There's a lot of options out there. There's rehab, there's AA and NA, there's, therapy, there's, life coaching. Like there's a ton of different options out there for you. And I think like you definitely need to choose the one that's right for you if this is something that you struggle with. But awareness, in my experience, awareness is the first key. Like, and I think that they even like practice that in NA and AA, just being aware that like there's an issue. Okay, no matter how like small, even if it's not like this taboo thing that the world looks down on, like even if it's just like a work addiction or a shopping addiction or a social media addiction, like be aware of that, because once an addiction gets started, it can spiral out of control real quick. And it doesn't matter if it started on social media or, with work or whatever. Addiction will damage your life regardless of what end of the spectrum it's on. So if it's not paid attention to, like if you don't have an awareness around what is going on. So the first key is to just be aware, like, and I don't want to say like, look at it as a problem. Just be aware that like, okay, there's an area of my life that is completely out of balance here. Like let's just use the work addiction as an example. I spend way too much time at work. I'm neglecting the connections in my life that I do have, like with my family, with my children, because I'm completely feeling like I have this need to be, to work and to connect with people I don't even know necessarily, or with, whatever this feeling that the work gives me. Okay, so right there, you can see that in that scenario, like you're avoiding connection that you already potentially have for a connection that gives you a feeling that you feel you are not getting from your existing connections. And this happens a lot. So the first thing to do would just to be recognize that, and then to start paying attention to where in your life you actually have connections that exist already that you could work on. Even if you don't feel completely connected to your husband or to your partner at this point, how can you work on that relationship to make them feel seen, heard, and understood, and through that feel seen, heard, and understood yourself? Okay. A lot of times relationships are ruined by addictions, and you already had that connection. You already had what you were seeking in the addiction, but because it wasn't maybe necessarily exactly the way you wanted it, or you didn't feel completely connected to it, or you just weren't recognizing it as connection, you sought out that connection in something else that ended up damaging that ended up damaging you and the current connection that you have. Okay, so recognize the connections you already have, and build connection with yourself. The only way that we can actually connect with others is if we are connecting with ourselves. So how often do you show yourself that you see, hear, and understand yourself? How often do you connect with yourself, like in a vulnerable, like legitimate way? Do you journal? Do you spend time meditating? Do you have conversations with yourself about the way that you feel? Do you honor your feelings? If you have depression and anxiety to whatever degree, do you honor that you're experiencing that? Or do you try to push it down or resist it or pretend that it's not there? Okay, so those would be like the best place to start, is by honoring your emotions, building a connection with yourself, and honoring the existence of connection that's already in your life. Because most of us already have connection in our life. We're just ignoring it because maybe we're ignoring our connection to ourselves. Or maybe we don't feel seen, heard, and understood by those people, and we're we don't want to try to get them to understand us. But a lot of times when that is the case, it's because you're not giving yourself that connection initially. So it makes it really hard to connect with other people. If you don't understand yourself, how can other people understand you? How can you express yourself in an authentic way that the people in your life can understand and connect with if you don't understand who you are? How can you have compassion and understanding for them if you don't understand who you are? And connection's a two-way street. You have to be able to understand and work towards understanding the people in your life in order for them to reciprocate that. Okay? Or to open that door at the very least. Okay? So those are the things that have, at least like the beginning part. This is obviously like a really in-depth subject, but I just wanted to touch lightly on it. And if you follow me on Instagram, my handle is at asacredspacewithkatie.com. Or I'm sorry, that's that's not what it is. It's at asacredspacewithkatie on Instagram. Then be sure to look out for when I have this co-live with Rachel Wish on healing addiction, because there will be more information on it. But I just wanted to pop onto the podcast and just like lightly touch over this subject and what I've learned, and just give you a few like simple tools and steps that you can get started on right away. All right, loves, I will talk to you soon. For free resources, ebooks, and other super awesome tools, go to my website, sacredspacewithkatie.com. I also want to remind you to subscribe so you always get the latest episode, and to leave a review so other people can find this podcast too. I super appreciate you tuning in today, and I will catch you in the next episode. Have a beautiful day.